some of you, so feel free to put your name, the company that you work with if you're comfortable, and where are you based in the chat, and let's make it engaging. Today we will cover Google Cloud Identity, which essentially is the first layer when you start interacting with Google Enterprise products or services. So with that, let me share a quick presentation that Willie and I created, and then after that, we can take some of the questions that some of you submitted already in the community, and also the questions that you will be asking in the QA functionality of this Google Meet. So just a second. Okay, let me know once you start seeing the screen. Can you see the screen?
Yep, looks great.
Okay, great. So this is how you can introduce yourself. I know you might be using Google Meet already, but just in case if you haven't started using it yet, you see the chat option where you can introduce yourself, and then right there you will find the option where you can go to Q&A and put your questions. You can vote on others' questions, so we can take the ones that are very prominent ones. With that, let's start and dive into Google Cloud Identity. Now, why identity? I mean, because it defines us. It can be as broad as saying we are a human being, or we are a tiny particle of this universe, or it can be, very specific, very narrow, just saying I'm a Google Workspace customer engineer. So it is something that defines us, but let's not go to that path, and let's go back to specifically what does it mean when we start talking about identity in technology. Every application that we use today needs to identify us as a unique user, so that we can, put some security controls and policies, and that's why identity is really required for us to uniquely identify those users. Now, it is usually the first layer because that's where your users will be interacting with your resources, and it is very prominent in terms of information security. I was reading an article by WSJ, and it was mentioned that around 2,000, for large businesses which has over 2,000 users, more than 200 applications are being used by every enterprise IT user. And smaller firms, even they have more than 70 applications used by their users. So there are a lot of applications. Things might already be working for you, but sometimes we have this status quo where we will say that we have it working, but if we do not take any action, there might be some consequences to it. So now let's take a step back and understand, what if we do not leverage something like cloud identity? How would it impact us and our business? So there are a few things that happens when a new user joins your organization. The first one is your HR team will inform your IT, and then IT will go ahead and create that new employee's account in multiple applications. If you go back to that survey, 73 applications if you're a small business, maybe 200 if you're a large business, which is, again, it's time consuming for your IT team. It's not secure at all, and it's an unpleasant experience doing it all manually. But that doesn't stop here. When these users will need to authenticate to these 70 or 100 applications, and they will need to carry different passwords, it is very painful. It is not secure. Unless you have been into IT, the first response of the user in such situation is just take one password, maybe password at 1, 2, 3, and put that in all of our applications, so it becomes easy for us to access it. Because user needs this experience to be pleasant. But on the other side, this makes us, the organizations, it increases our insecurity posture. So administration is also painful, because in case if there are multiple applications, multiple users, they might forget their passwords, face different issues with authentication. They will come back to admin. Admin will need to invest a lot of time in dealing with unnecessary technology operations. And again, this is not unpleasant. This is not a pleasant experience for any IT admin too. It doesn't stop here too. When the user leaves the organization, you need to deprovision that user. unless you have something centralized, it will be the same painful or time-consuming process again. IT will need to go to all the applications and deprovision that user in all of these applications. And at the end of the day, we are human beings. Just in case if we forget to delete or deprovision that user from one of those applications, it increases our security risk. So what do we do with that? With Google, there are a couple of offerings which can help you become which can help you with centralized identity offering. But before we move into that, let me help you understand that Google has two dedicated identity offerings. First one is called Google Cloud Identity, which is the topic for today's discussion. It is primarily for your workforce. Now, your workforce may include your full-time employees or contractors who would need to access your day-to-day applications to get their work done. This is called as workforce identity. The second one is identity platform, which is primarily for use cases where you as a developer would be developing an application, and instead of writing all the identity modules like creating the users, forget passwords, MFA, and all that authentication related modules, you can simply plug and play Google's identity module where you will just call our identity platform APIs to get things done, and we will take care of things like forget password, MFA, user creation, etc., which is often known as customer identity. If you have this use case, let us know. We can maybe cover that in a dedicated session sometime. But in today's session, let's talk about cloud identity, which is for your workforce. So what is cloud identity? It is an identity as a service offering from Google. It lives in cloud, and it can help you manage your identities centrally so that you don't need to go to multiple applications to maybe provision or deprovision your users, or giving them multiple passwords for multiple applications, etc. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. So how can you leverage Google Cloud Identity in your business? First of all, it provides you a few functionalities which can help you have everything like in identity as centralized. It starts with cloud-based directory. You might be using Ldap or Active Directory in your past or maybe now, and whatever functionalities is offered by directory, it is included in cloud identity subscription, including an option to create users and groups and members and organizational units to create hierarchy. And then you can also apply some settings and policies to make sure that your organization has enhanced security posture. It can also help you with centralized authentication. For example, your users will not need to carry multiple passwords if you have multiple applications offerings for them. You can, of course, traditionally, just like password policies where you say, my users cannot reuse the password, or password will be expiring in next 90 days. Those kind of traditional policies, for sure, you can do that with cloud identity, but you can take a step further and be more granular where you can enforce multi-factor authentication included within the cloud identity subscription. You can also go for Saml, where two identities or two entities can talk to each other without a need to share credentials, where your users can simply go to the service application, and Google as an identity provider will let them know that let this user log in. It also offers Ldap. Now, when you plan to switch from some of the legacy identity providers like Ldap, you might have some applications which still rely on Ldap servers, maybe your local payroll application or Radius application. For that, Google Cloud Identity offers something called Secure Ldap, where think of it as Ldap as a service. So you're leveraging Google Cloud-based directory as your Ldap service provider, which is sitting in the cloud, where you can simply, call Google's Ldap for authentication, authorization, and everything is logged in. It gets reported within Google Admin Console. And finally, you have password vaulted applications. So in case if your users would be using some applications which do not support modern authentication protocols like OpenID Connect or Saml, then you can leverage password vaulted applications where you can simply, it's like a password manager. You might be using LastPass or Dashlane in your personal life. Think of password vaulted apps as those same password manager, but it is controlled by you as a Google Cloud Identity admin. You can also leverage authorization in Google Cloud Identity. So even once your users are authenticated, you can add an authorization layer saying even if the user is authenticated, can user access this specific application or not? So for example, you can leverage app access where you can provide very granular access to your applications, and not just the Google applications like Google Ads or Google Analytics or Google Workspace applications, but also the applications where Google is acting as your identity provider. Maybe you have Salesforce as your application where Google is acting as identity provider. You can be very granular. You can assign those applications based on, for example, group membership. So you can say, whoever is part of my sales organization should be able to access Salesforce. And then behind the scenes, you can also leverage Google's cloud-based directories, dynamic groups to say, if any user joins our organization who has department is equal to sales, then put that user into sales organizational unit, or maybe sales group. And because sales group has access to Salesforce, you can automate it this way. Then you have context-aware access, where one side you have your resources, for example, your applications or your servers, and on the other side you have your user population, your full-time or employees or contractors. In between, you can define your context-aware policy. So even if the user is authenticated to Google or logged in, what this user can access depends on context-aware. So for example, you can create policies based on geographic location, saying user can only access Google Cloud Platform or maybe this specific application if the user is coming from United States or any other country. Or maybe you can say only if my users are sitting inside office premises, then they should be able to access XYZ applications. You can also create policies based on devices. So for example, you can say, is it a company-owned device? Is it running latest Windows or Mac operating system patch? And finally, you can also go with programmatic access. Now, as you know, if you would be using Google products, you are running everything in cloud. Now you might need other services. So maybe you are using Google Workspace and now you need access to an email marketing service, or maybe a CRM software that is available in Google Marketplace. You can define, or you can create policies how these third-party developer applications can access your data. You can create your own allowed list where you say only my users can only access applications which are in this allowed list. Or maybe you can go a step further, saying only if the third-party application has this client ID and asking for this specific OAuth scope, then it should be allowed, otherwise not. So you can go pretty granular. It also includes user lifecycle management. So the examples we saw earlier, we have a ready-made catalog of a few of the applications which are available where you can just add them. And once you do that, then you can create policy. For example, you say once the user joins and becomes part of this specific group, create their account in that target application so that you don't need to do that manually. And it also applies to deprovisioning of application. So you can say as soon as the user is suspended or deleted inside Google, then that user should be suspended in the target application. So you can automate that. Multi-factor authentication, you don't need to go standalone. It is included within the Google Cloud Identity itself, and we support multiple factors, including SMS and Google Authenticator, any TOTP-based factors. You can also go with security keys, which we use inside Google too. And you have pretty flexible features there. You can create a policy saying my multi-factor should be uh, applicable on this specific date, so that before that you can let your users know that this is coming, and you can generate reports to make sure that everyone is enrolled. And then once that date comes, it will be enforced so that users must come with MFA. There was a feature which we launched some time ago. It's called Post Saml Mfa. It is primarily for cases where you are using Google Cloud Identity as a service provider. Maybe you already have invested in some other third-party IDaaS application. You can use them, and generally what happens is when service providers like us receive a SAML response, we will trust the SAML IDP, and we will let the user log in or not logged in based on the SAML response. But we created this additional feature to make it a bit more secure, where you can ask us to do post SAML MFA challenge in case of, based on some of the data that we collect to ensure that this login attempt is not suspicious. If based on those signals, if we find anything suspicious, even if the SAML response says this is fine, let the user log in, we can still challenge that user with Google side of MFA. It also includes endpoint management. So for example, you can manage your Android and iOS devices, and you can also manage your Windows 10 devices. And that includes authentication options. So for example, if you have a Windows 10 device, your users, after some configuration, when your users try to log in to their Windows 10 device, they will see another option, which is Google, or sign in with Google. They can just put their Google credentials, including the MFA from Google side, and then they can log into their Windows 10 device. Once they're logged in, they will have native experience. They can go to any application where Google is acting as an identity provider, whether it's Google native application like Google Workspace or Google Cloud Platform, or maybe a third-party SAML application. They will not need to enter their credentials because there is already a session established. Now, on Windows 10 devices, you can also push the policies. So for example, if my policy says, it's a company-owned device and users are not allowed to use, let's say, USB drive or maybe their webcam, etc., you can push those policies. So if you are somewhere thinking to retire your Ldap, or considering cloud-based endpoint management, cloud identity can be one of those options. In terms of Mac, you can authenticate your Mac devices via Google Cloud Identity. We also have integration with their device enrollment program. However, we are not there yet where you would be able to push policies on Mac devices. And finally, Chrome, in case if you have Chrome browser, most of the policies can be applied there in terms of endpoint management, including our zero trust offering or context aware. And in case if you use Chrome OS devices, you can also go granular and apply device-based policies. Some of the security controls provided along with the ones that we discussed are DLP. For sure, it's not part of the Google Cloud Identity subscription itself, but it works very well in complementing Google Workspace, where you can create your data loss prevention policies based on email or Drive or which website or which application as user accessing. And everything happens within the cloud itself. You can also have data region policies, so you can say my data should be residing within the United States or Europe. And then a recent add-on to it is client-side encryption, where your data is encrypted and you or your partner will retain the keys. Google will not have access to those keys. So encryption happening on the client itself. And finally, cloud identity also includes the compliances like HIPAA compliance. So in case if you need to sign BAA, Google Cloud Identity is capable to do that too. And finally, for accountability purposes, you want everything to be logged in inside Google, be it the actions taken by users and also from your IT admins. And that's where logging and reporting provides you a lot of flexibility. We have the native reporting available. So within the Google Cloud Identity Admin dashboard, you will be able to see all the logs. Some of the logs are retained for 6 months. However, in case if you have needs for longer duration, maybe you have some sort of compliance to follow, then we provide other options, including our native data warehouse BigQuery integration, where your logs will be sent every day to BigQuery project, where you can keep them as long as you want, and you can run your SQL queries there, or maybe add any visualization layer like Looker if required. We also integrate with some native or prominent SIEM systems like Splunk. So if you use one of those, you can have the native integrations. And finally, in case if you have any homegrown reporting system, or maybe you have very custom need, you need to take the logs from Google and ingest them somewhere, you can certainly leverage our reporting API. Okay, so there are a lot of providers in the market offering centralized identity provider options, including, directory and authentication, authorization, etc. So why specifically cloud identity? I think there might be a few things that you can leverage with Google. The first one is we have been managing over 1 billion identities. So more than 7 of our products are would have now 1 billion plus active users. So we know how to manage identities. There are a lot of signals that are collected behind the scenes. And this is all possible based on the strength of that data. Like, this is a huge volume that we get. So we have been learning from it. And that's why you might be seeing some of the machine learning based algorithms behind the scenes to detect whether the login attempt is suspicious or not. Security and controls, we discussed some of these, and there are a lot of security and controls available within Google Cloud Identity itself. And finally, it is cost effective. If you look at other identity providers, you will see that some of the features which are included within Cloud Identity, for example, multi-factor authentication, it is charged as a standalone offering. And there are organizations that are selling multi-factor authentication as a standalone offering, which is included within Google Cloud Identity. And especially in case if you are already using Google Workspace as your messaging and collaboration system, or maybe you are considering it, everything that we are discussing here is part of Google Workspace itself. So you do not need to sign up for a third-party IDP just to get these features. If you have appropriate Google Workspace license, your users will have all of the functionalities that we just talked about. Okay, now in case if you are not yet a Google customer, or maybe you are using some of our products or services and you're asking, is Google Cloud Identity necessary? Why can't we just create a Gmail account and start accessing our services? So let's clear that too. There are 2 ways to create Google accounts to access Google products and services. First one is called a consumer account. Now, you can simply go to Google and sign up for either a Gmail account, or you can also use your own domain and still sign up for a consumer account. That's the first way, which we call unmanaged account, because user himself or herself is managing that account, not his or her business or the organization. Other way to create these accounts are called managed accounts, where you will create a work account. Like, first, you will register your company with us. You will tell us that this is our domain name, and we will ask you to verify that you actually own that domain. And once that's done, we will give you access to a admin dashboard where you will be able to create your users, and these are work accounts. So essentially, you will manage them. You would be able to change their password, delete them, suspend them. you can enforce some security policies on them. For example, you can say my users can only log in if they are coming from company devices, or maybe only log in if they have enrolled into second factor of authentication, and let me enforce security key MFA only policy, etc. But keep this in mind. If your users would be accessing Google data with their consumer accounts, then everything that's there in their account, and I've seen that especially in some cases where small businesses are signing up for Google Ads or Google Analytics using their consumer account, that data actually belongs to the user himself or herself. As an organization, you cannot go back after a year saying, give me that data because it is our business data. No, as per the terms of service, they signed up for a consumer account and they have the right to keep that data unless they are willingly okay to transfer that data to the organizational account. So it is okay to use those consumer accounts for personal use. I also have one. I think everybody does. But in case if for business purposes, it does not matter what's the size of your organization. Even if you're a startup or a large business, you should every time go with Google Work accounts and not the consumer accounts. Now, with that in mind, the question comes in, is cloud identity must for our organization? So let's cover a couple of scenarios here. Cloud identity is must in case if you do not use Google Workspace and you need to access some of the Google applications with your managed accounts or work accounts. So let's assume you do not use Google Workspace, but you are using Google Cloud Platform, or maybe you have an account with Google Analytics where you're tracking your website data, or you are using Google Ads to market your product and services. In those cases, you must start with Google Cloud Identity, create your work accounts, and then you can assign those applications to your work users. Now, second case would be you already use Google Workspace. Do you need cloud identity in that case? It really depends. You do not need one, but there might be some cases where you can actually complement your Google Workspace subscription with cloud identity. Let's take a scenario here. For example, you have some contractors and they won't need access to things like Gmail. They just need to access some of the third-party applications that you would be using, like Google Ads or Google Cloud Platform, to do some of your work. In that case, you can do like a multi-subscription service where you can have Google Workspace licenses for your full-time employees, and for those contractors, you can assign them Google Cloud Identity license. This way, you save the cost on one side because you're not leveraging Google Workspace. They are just using Google Cloud Identity. And on the other side, you can enforce all your security policies on those contractors when they access your resources. Logging and reporting, as we discussed, we provide native logging and reporting capabilities where all the actions taken by your users and the admins, they will be logged inside Google Cloud Identity, or if you're using Google Workspace, then Google Workspace Admin Console. There are multiple options available because by default, we retain most of the logs for 6 months. If I recall correctly, I think email logs are retained for 30 days, but the rest of the logs are retained for 6 months. I understand there are customers who would need to retain logs even for longer durations, maybe to follow some compliances. And if that's your use case, you can either go for BigQuery, which is our data warehouse. And once you do the initial configuration, all your logs will be available within Google BigQuery project, where you can run your SQL queries, or you can top it up with any visualization application. In case if you use Splunk, we have native integration with them. And finally, if you have any very specific homegrown system, or maybe a specific need to take logs from Google and ingest them somewhere else, then you can certainly leverage Google's reporting API. There is a data and retention lag times help article. I would recommend you to read that in case if you need to understand, how long do we retain data for specific applications available inside Google Cloud Identity or Workspace, and the lag time, like once the log is generated, how long would it take for you to see that? Okay, with that, thank you so much. I think this was a quick overview of Google Workspace and Google Cloud Identity and how they can you can complement them with each other in some scenarios. We'll be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Great, thank you, Goldy. And just as a quick reminder, this is because we are recording this and this will be public. We won't be able to answer any roadmap questions, but I will include my email link in the chat so we can chat offline, but unfortunately won't be able to answer any roadmap questions. I see those coming in. That being said, a couple questions did come in from the community before we started the Q&A session, so we'll start there. The first one is Cloud Identity Premium and Microsoft EMS E3 or E5 same in features and functioning?
Great question. I'm not very much aware of Microsoft specific SKU features and functionalities that are provided, but I would recommend let's connect offline. And personally, if you can, like, we can help you connect with somebody inside, and if you can let us know which features and functionalities are required, we can map them up one by one so you can make an informed decision whether you can replace that or consider Google Cloud Identity in comparison to that offering.
Great. Second one is up to how many users can the free version of Google Cloud Identity hold?
That's a great question. The cap that we have today for Google Cloud Identity Free, and by the way, Google Cloud Identity comes in two different flavors. One is called free, where, of course, you can get it for free. And then the second one is paid. I think the public price is $6 per user per month. So free comes with 50 users cap. However, in case if you have a use case where it is justifiable, there is a public form which you can fill up. If you just Google for Google Cloud Identity Cap, you can fill up that form as an admin, defining your use case and why you need us to increase that cap. And then support team should be able to help you with that. But yeah, by default limit is 50. However, it can be increased if there is a justification.
Great. Next question is, what are the add-on security features available in Cloud Identity and Premium in comparison to the free version?
Sure. So there are very specific features which are only available in premium version of Cloud Identity. For example, we discussed secure Ldap, where you are taking Google Cloud Directory and using it in directory as a service fashion to authenticate applications which would need Ldap protocol, maybe a local application that you have connected with Ldap or Microsoft Active Directory. You can replace that by calling Google as your Ldap. So that's only available in the premium version. Context-aware access, where you can include things like geography-based policies or network-based policies, or maybe device-based policies saying if the user comes from this location or this IP range, or if the user has company device, or if the user is using Windows or Mac XYZ operating system patch, then only give them access to my corporate resources, otherwise not. So this kind of context-aware access, that's also available only in Cloud Identity Premium. Now, when it comes to authentication, like single sign-on, that's available in both free and premium versions. But in case if you plan to leverage automated provisioning in Cloud Identity, that's only available in Cloud Identity Premium. And if you do a quick search on Google Cloud Identity Free versus Premium in Google, you'll find, I think, first couple of results that will give you like the complete table, though, so you can look pretty granularly which features are available in both of them.
Great. Next up, we've got Ian. Hi, Ian. How you doing? Thanks for joining the call. Great to see you. The question is it possible to use provisioning, deprovisioning capabilities of Google Cloud Identity without switching away from the current SAML SSO authentication system? And Ian, if you want to come off mute and elaborate, feel free to do so if I miss anything.
Yeah, hi. Just essentially asking whether we can use some of the, setting up of accounts, tearing down of accounts that you mentioned without having to switch our entire, SSO IDP over into Google and our password store there. I work for the University of California, Berkeley, and doing a switch like that would be effectively impossible at our scale. So I'm wondering, can we leverage some of these other capabilities without having to, switch everything over to using Google to sign on?
So if I get it right, your plan is to switch to Google Cloud Identity as your identity provider and should be able to do user provisioning.
No, we were wanting to use Google Cloud Identity not as our full-on identity provider. We were hoping to use the parts that where you can create an account in a third party, deprovision an account in a third party. Certainly we could make a copy of the directory info into Google. That's no problem. We just don't want to switch all of our authentication over to Google.
Sure. So both of these functionalities are kept separate, like provisioning and authentication. So you do not need to do authentication with Google as an IDP. You can simply leverage Google as your IDP for provisioning and deprovisioning. Maybe, let's say, if I use Office 365 for Salesforce, I can create that application connector inside Google. And then create my rule saying this application is assigned for this specific group. When a user becomes member of this group, then create their account in that specific target application. So you can, yes, certainly leverage Google Cloud Identity to provision and deprovision those users inside your target applications, depending that application is available inside our catalog. If it's not, then you can leverage Directory API to do some custom work. But yeah, you don't need to use authentication from Google. You can still use whichever authentication mechanism you have with service and still leverage the provisioning.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah, Brian Kim actually came up with the acronym. We were wondering whether we could use the, which I couldn't with the SCIM and without having to use SAML. It sounds like that's possible, which is great news. Thank you.
Yep.
Great. Next up, can I get some pointers on how to use Google Login on a Windows 10 PC? This one's from Alex. Alex, if you want to elaborate, feel free to do so as well.
Yeah, so basically the big problem that I'm trying to solve is I'm using GCDS, so I have AD as my main directory, and everything else is every single user account is copied to Google using GCDS. But now we effectively have two identity, one in AD and one in Google, and I would like to just merge and have everything managed by Google. I mean, I would like at least to be able to log in, my user to log in on Windows 10 using Google and have only one password and not two.
Understand. Sure. So there is a utility. It's called Gcpw, Google Credential Provider for Windows. You will need to push that to the devices that you want to be able to log in with Google as your IDP. So this way, once you have the initial setup done, of course, there might be multiple ways to do that configurations. For example, if you want your users to have multiple options to log into Windows devices, one is log in with their local Windows credential, or maybe log in with their AD credentials. And as a complement, you can log in with Google. That's one option. Other option can be that you can have only Google as your identity provider for Windows 10 devices. That's possible too. And maybe I think Dan just pinged the support article in the chat, so you may leverage that. But once the initial configuration is done, then users will not need access to their AD password. They can, when they log into their Windows devices, they will see login with Google option. They will need to enter their Google username and password, including the MFA if you have enforced it. And then once that's done, users will be signing in to their Windows 10 devices with Google credentials. In case if you plan to use AD in conjunction in some way, we can work, we integrate with AD in a way that you can still have one password. But if your plan is to maybe in a long run retire your Ldap or AD, you can just have Google and still log in to Windows 10 devices and also push policies to Windows 10 devices.
Okay, I'll have a look at Gcpw. Is it supported by Google or by a third party?
Yeah, it's a Google utility. Okay. So you can certainly project.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Alex. Next up is from Matt. Is there a table I can see somewhere which describes the various cloud identity features and integrations in terms of beta versus production? I'm leery of building any business processes around any service that Google might later deem unnecessary and eliminate.
I think there was a huge investment in Google Cloud Identity. So if you look at last 6 months to 12 months time frame, you will see that we have been launching new features and functionalities. Like recently, we announced multiple IDP, where in case if you are using Google Cloud Identity as your service provider and maybe other services as your IDP, you can now have multiple IDPs where you can say, if the user belongs to sales organization, or maybe if the user belongs to APAC organizational unit, then Octa is the IDP, whereas for America's organizational unit, Azure is the IDP, and for rest, Google is the IDP. We also launched a partial single sign-on and a bunch of other features. So at this point, based on the roadmap that's coming up, I don't think that something will be taken away. It's a very strategic area for us, and there is an investment in that, and you might see more features coming up soon.
Great. Let's see. Next up, we have. I think this may be roadmap related, but I'm going to defer to you, Goldy. Any progress on the possibility to log into Gcpw on Windows using Yubikey as two-factor authentication instead of Totp?
That's a great question. Maybe we can take it offline. I'll need to check whether it's a part of roadmap or not.
Got it. Kim, I think that was you, so we're in contact, so I'll reach out to you offline. Next up is, I would like to use password expiration to force a password change upon expiration. I have found in testing that when the password expires, the change password URL is bypassed, and passwords can be changed in Google rather than the on-prem service. Is this a bug?
Is this in conjunction with using Gcpw?
This is coming from
No, it's not. This is just using logging into Google, the web interface, browser interface.
Okay, understood. Personally, I'm not aware of this, so maybe either we can chat offline, or if you check with our support team, they can confirm whether is there some misconfiguration, or if it's a bug, or if they can help you with that.
Okay, thanks.
I put my community handle in the chat as well, so please feel free to reach out to me there, and I can help you get the question answered as well. Next up from Pablo, any plans for more integrations for GIT provisioning? There are currently very few integrations with HR systems like Bamboo and Workday.
A great question. I mean, I used to work with Octa, so I do understand that this is something that's very important, where you take your HR system and you make it HR as a master. So whatever happens in your HR, that should be reflected to Google Cloud Identity or Workspace, and then it can be downstream to your target applications. Good question. It's a public call, so we shouldn't be talking anything about specifically the roadmap items. But if you connect with us offline, we should be happy to give you like exact details on where we are on that.
Great. And then there's another question from you, Seth. With the Windows 10 endpoint management integration, if screen lock screensaver is in use, would multi-factor authentication use be required every time the screen locks, or is it just password to unlock the screen?
Good question. So it is based on the session. So once the session is established, Google will not be asking for re-authenticate within that session timeframe. Based on your Google Cloud identity or your Google Workspace subscription, you can actually control the session timeout, so you can make it minimum. Also, we differentiate between the authentication and authorization. Depending on your subscription of Cloud Identity or Google Workspace, you can also leverage context-aware access. So, based on some of the factors like IP range or geographic location or device attributes or Chrome attributes, you can define your authorization policies to make sure that even if the user has the session established, can the user still access this specific resource in the moment or not? And when you enforce context-aware access policies, especially in Google Workspace applications, they are dynamic. So the context will be evaluated every time user tries to access that application or doing something with the application. As soon as that context breaks, user will be denied access to that specific resource.
Great. Cool. A couple more questions. Can Cloud Identity replace our existing Ldap?
Great question. I was expecting this for sure. So, as most of the things in technology, it really depends. So personally, sometimes we face the question saying, can you replace Microsoft Azure or Active Directory or Octa? And the answer is it really depends. What I would recommend you is to maybe create a Google Sheet and do your inventory. So where you will say that these are the 10 or 15 applications that we use internally, and the protocol that we use for these applications is SAML. And then we have these 5 applications which would need Ldap protocol. And then we have these 15 applications that do not support modern authentication protocol. They will need something. And then similarly make a list of the applications where you are leveraging your existing IDP or your Ldap for things like automated provisioning and deprovisioning. Once you have your list ready, then you should start finding the IDP, because in case if somebody provides more features and functionalities, personally, I think that's not the way to look at your future identity provider vendor. So once you have that list ready, then start comparing it with Google Cloud Identity and start doing the check boxes. Okay, can Google map these 10 SAML applications that we use? Can Google do auto provisioning, deprovisioning in these applications, etc.? And that will help you figure out whether Cloud Identity can replace your existing application or IDP or not. Personally, I think if you look at the Active Directory or Ldap server, it has a few functions. The first one is it's a directory itself, which Google Cloud Directory also is. It's a cloud-based one. Second, it can help you with authentication, primarily in case if you combine it with something like ADFS. AD cannot do the authentication itself to SaaS applications. So Cloud Identity has the authentication inbuilt too. You can leverage SAML or OpenID Connect, and then you can leverage MFA, etc. Just in case if you still need Ldap, maybe you're running some local applications, you can leverage Google as your Ldap in a service fashion. So it has everything that you would need, but again, it depends. So maybe connect with us offline or check out with partners and to make your wise decision.
Great. Next step, how does it compare to Octa and Azure Active Directory?
Great question. So again, I would come back to the same answer. If you look at the features and functionalities, that's one way to compare to different vendors. But I would recommend you take a step back and first start with your requirements, make a list of the applications that you are using. How are you doing authentication to these applications? How are you doing provision, deprovisioning to these applications? And then start comparing the vendors, whether it's Octa or Azure or Google Cloud Identity. One thing that's very specific to Google is if you are already a Google Workspace customer, you are not going to invest money into some third-party application. So it will be cost-effective if we can help you achieve everything that you need today. So I would recommend you to take a step back. Do not just go with Octa versus Cloud Identity or Workspace. Make a list of your requirements and then start comparing so that you can make an informed decision.
Great. One more from this person. How can we evaluate without impacting our existing systems?
Great question. So you can sign up for a Google Cloud Identity, and then maybe you can just use us as your IDP for very specific low-hanging fruit. Maybe you have any inbuilt application which is primarily used for some testing use cases, or maybe if you have a SaaS application or OpenID Connect application, just start with that one or two testing application. That too, you can be very granular, just assign that application to a couple of test users, start moving gradually. And once you find that we can help you, just start provisioning, start coming up with more applications. And this is how you can evaluate and you can even adopt Google Cloud Identity or Workspace without impacting your existing systems.
Great. So I see a handful more questions, and they're pretty much all geared toward the roadmaps. I'm going to just sound them off to you, Goldy, and let me know. And if not, then we will connect offline. But the first one is, any plans to further develop dynamic groups?
I think recently I don't recall, but recently there was some announcement or a feature which we launched. I think adding more attributes maybe in dynamic groups. So I think there was a dedicated team, and you may expect more features coming into that. And rest, keep following our roadmap. I think this community would have access to roadmaps inside Google Cloud community. So just keep watching for it.
Yeah, and again, I'll put my community handle in there one more time, but please feel free to reach out to me if you need access to the roadmap and or follow up with Goldy and team. The next one is, are there plans for making some actions automated, such as onboarding and offboarding? Anticipate that's roadmap, but let me know if not.
You mean enhancing the existing catalog, or because there is already user lifecycle management capabilities inside Google Cloud Identity, where we have a catalog. It's a considerable catalog. So if the question is, can we do that? Yes, but you will need to figure out which applications you need Google to be doing auto provisioning, and then map it up with our catalog. If it's not available there, then depending on how many applications would be in gap. If it's just one or two, you may leverage directory API to do some sort of custom work and get it done and save some cost sticking with Google instead of signing up with a third-party identity provider. If the gap is huge, then check with us if we have something coming in the roadmap, and then this way you can make an informed decision.
Great. And so we have time for one more. What is the technical difference between the Google user directory, the one you get in your admin console with license, and the cloud directory? And why, if any, is there any difference at all? Meaning we need to purchase license for one and the other.
It is same. So in case if you're a Google Cloud Identity customer, or you're a GCP customer, or you're a Google Workspace customer, think of this like you have one centralized directory which is leveraged by all our services. Service can be GCP, Analytics, AdWords, etc. But this is one central directory where you can create users, and that directory is part of the subscription itself. So if you sign up for Google Cloud Identity Free or Premium or Google Workspace, you get access to Cloud Directory. You don't need any specific subscription other than these to access cloud directory. So there is no difference. There is one single directory, which is leveraged by multiple services that we have.
Great. So I know we're right up against the hour. Thank you all for joining. As I mentioned before, this is recorded. We will post it within the community. We have a survey if you could fill out real quick. Just let us know your thoughts. Let us know ideas for the next session. And then real quickly, this will be a monthly session. So each month, Goldy and I will get together. We will present. And real quickly, next month, we will have another session coming up on August 23rd around conflicting accounts. This will be within the community as well. But again, thank you for joining. And my community handles in the chat. So please feel free to reach out to me there. I can get you access to the roadmap and get your questions answered. And thank you all for joining. Have a great rest of your day.
Yep. Thanks. Bye-bye.